but now we're talking, what does Indiana football and basketball have to do to get to the next level this season? Football first. There was a comment by, where's Tony? Is it? There we go. Chris said if IU can beat Cincinnati and win 2 of the 4 against Iowa, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, they go to the next level. I think you need to focus more on the Penn State, Michigan State, Iowa State side because it's your divisional side. But I want to see them win 3 out of those 4. Now that's me. I'm always pushing the envelope. But they did this last year for the most part. But now you're adding fans. That's going to change everything.
Yeah.
You're going to an Iowa Niall Kinnick Stadium that is going to be – they've been held out of football. They like their football out there. They've been held out of not going. But there's a lot of emotion in this game. I don't know. The players, it's probably more so for the fans than the players. The Bartabo, all that Bartabo stuff.
You're right.
Gary Barta, the AD. But you know what? The importance of this game, if they win at Iowa, buddy, that starts the rocket. It doesn't send the rocket up. That starts the engines. You have now ignite engines. If you win at Iowa, that ignites the engines on that rocket. You come back home, you beat Cincinnati, the Rockets, the things are falling away, and then you go and you knock off Penn State and a Michigan, that Rocket's going on its way. I don't care what you do with Ohio State as long as you don't get blown out. But they have to take care of business on the underside. And by that, I mean Michigan State, Penn State. You got to take care of that.
I think to an extent, this is probably the most important season opener for Tom Allen that he's had there. And he's had some important games. His very first game as his very first game as the
They were big. I don't know how important they were because they didn't really have the talent, but they were big games. Yeah,
they were big games. They played Ohio State, and then last year, obviously, they opened the year with Penn State. So they've had some big week 1 games, but this one in terms of importance, because there's an expectation that you're going to go to Iowa, and I don't know if Indiana's going to be favored or not, but there's an expectation by the fan base that you should go into Kinnick Stadium and win that game. And then a few weeks later, you come home and you're going to play a ranked Cincinnati team that people are going to expect you to win that game. So it's going to be incredibly important. And some of the biggest games that Indiana is going to play are on the road. If I'm not mistaken, they'll play Iowa, Michigan, and Penn State on the road. And so, as you mentioned, it's a lot different playing those games in front of an empty stadium than it is in front of 100,000 people. So there's a lot of pressure entering that first game. But I do think that the importance of winning last season, it kind of got the monkey off their back a little bit because Indiana had always fallen short against Michigan or Ohio State or Penn State. They couldn't quite get over the hump. They had come close. And so I'm interested to see, now that that pressure is kind of off of them, how do they handle this new pressure? Because they're no longer, well, to an extent they are, but they're kind of the hunted. I mean, Penn State that's going to be a circled game on Penn State's calendar because of how they lost last year. Iowa isn't going to overlook Indiana. Michigan, because of what happened last season, that's going to be another big game for Jim Harbaugh. That could be a job. His job could ride or die on that game. So there's a lot of really important games. There's a lot of stakes. I agree. I think if you win 3 out of those 5, you're in good shape. You'd like to win 4, but I think 3, you would say that again about any other time in Indiana history, and you'd be celebrating for days if you could win 3 of those games. So I think 3 is still attainable. If more of those games were at home, I would probably agree with you, but going to Michigan, going to Penn State, going to Iowa, that's tough.
The funny thing is, should have won at Ohio State last year. I mean, it's easy to say should have, but you know they had a pick 6 You had a fumbled interception in the red zone and a fumbled catch in the red zone. They lose by 1 score.
Mm-hmm.
So that's hard to deal with. The year before at Penn State, same thing. They've shown they can do it. They can be there. They haven't shown they can finish, because this is going to the bowl game situation. Haven't finished yet. Got to finish. That's another thing. Must get to a bowl game, a good bowl game, and win that thing. Win that thing. Last year was just a weird lack of fun. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened last year at the bowl game.
I can tell you Michael Penix wasn't on the field, and that's what happened, in my opinion.
Well, that yes. I mean, I kind of had forgotten about that just because you'd started dealing without it. But against an Ole Miss, that's a team they should have beaten. But when you're going against a wounded Lane Kiffin, who knows he's going to have to do some stuff, that's dangerous, and it was dangerous.
It was, and the thing about that game too, and not that we need to harp on that loss, is Lane Kiffin is one of the best schemers. I don't think he's appreciated as a schemer. And when you give him that time to prepare, I mean, we saw why he's a really good football coach in that game. And so not having Michael Penix, I think, was kind of a doomsday situation for that game. But I would argue almost, I mean, you have, in my opinion, Indiana, there's no reason you can't get to 8 or 9 wins this season, but you have to win that bowl game. That's almost more important than winning 3 out of those games, because you have to prove that you can do it in the postseason. You haven't won a bowl game in 30 years. So you've got to get over that hump too. That's got to be priority. Well, I don't know if it's priority number 1, because you got a 12-game schedule, but that has to be one of the biggest goals in that locker room this season, is getting to a good bowl game and winning it, because then that gives you even more momentum heading into the next season.
Okay, on the basketball side, Tennessee sent, I think next year must get is a power forward, a couple 6'8", 6'9" guys, plus a center, he says. Chris Ayers, to me, Jalen Washington is the must-have recruit because he's from the region, and IU has never recruited Fort Wayne or above well, even under Knight. Now, hopefully, Fife can help with that. They haven't. Well, that's with good reason. You've got Notre Dame and Purdue up there. But Jalen Washington is more of a national recruit, definitely. Saw him play last Sunday against Xavier Booker. Xavier Booker looks really, really good as well. 2 similar players. But, yeah, those are both guys that are going to be big-time pieces for Indiana. But that's that. Recruiting, I am serious. I do not think recruiting is ever going to be a problem for Indiana again. Not right now. These kids have shown, hey, we're coming to look at Indiana. Doesn't matter where they're from, because it has what they need. They want to get to the next level. It has that. It has all that and more. So there's no issues. Indiana is a place where they can achieve that. It was not very much before. And I've said this before. Look at schools. Use Purdue as an example. How many players do they have in the NBA right now? 2 versus Indiana's 8 or 9? It's the facts speak for themselves, man. And that was before Mike Woodson got here. So I think that is just going to continue to carry weight. The success of that program, I think, is going to improve quickly.
But doesn't that speak to the complete lack of development on Indiana? Yeah. It's almost like Michigan football, in the sense that Michigan still gets the 4- and 5-star recruits. They still are competitive with Ohio State every year in terms of the number of players drafted. But this time in the middle, they can't beat Ohio State. They can't win a Big Ten title. Well, Indiana still gets the recruits. They're still producing NBA talent at a fairly high level, not at Kentucky or North Carolina levels, but at a fairly high level. So what's happening at this time in the middle? And at the end of the Tom Crean era, and then all throughout the Archie Miller era, you just didn't have that development. That wasn't happening. So that's why I say to me, that's even more important than the recruiting. You were still getting some of those guys. You had really talented guys. They just weren't performing when they were in Bloomington. And I don't think
I said it for 2 years. I said it for 2 years. But more importantly, those guys at the top and upper end, those other guys are not getting developed for when they come up to replace or replenish or
Right.
whatever.
Mhm.
So it's a constant void. There's always a vacuum without that constant churn of up level of talent coming up. They have that now. It's going to be, even when you're going to be bringing in constant new pieces, but you've got the constant pieces that are here as well. They have to also improve and consistently improve. That will happen now. And if it doesn't, they won't be here.
Right.
It's that simple.